Hello and welcome to my specialization introduction and outdoor content guide for the Arcane Mage in World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth. If you haven't watched the primer video for this series, I recommend that you do that now. There'll be a link in the description below, and that'll get you up to speed on what we're doing in this video. Alright, so we're here on our Arcane Mage. We got our action bars up and visible. If we go into our talent tree, these are the talents you could pick to fulfill the requirements laid out in the primer video. And with that said, we'll jump into our spell book and we're going to start arranging organizing our spells. Now, I won't be going in depth into every single one of these, but I will at least give you a brief description so that you know what the ability does and why it's going in the category that it is. So first off, we have Arcane, Barrage, Blast, and Explosion. These are all going to be part of our core rotation. Arcane Intellect, you could choose to put this in your miscellaneous, or I put it down here on the right hand side of my combat utility area. This is a buff that will increase our intellect for an hour. I put it down here because you don't need to use it a lot, but it is nice to remember, like, hey, I should have this buff on. Arcane Missiles is part of our core rotation. Arcane Power, this is a offensive cooldown ability. It will increase our spell damage and make our spells cost less mana. Blink is a combat utility ability that we can use. It blinks us forward 20 yards. Conjure Refreshment, that goes in our miscellaneous section, and it allows us to summon up some food that we can then use to restore our health and mana. This will also conjure food for your allies as well. Counterspell is our interrupt ability that'll interrupt spell casting, goes in our crowd control section. Displacement is a combat utility ability that we can use as well. This will teleport us back to the place that we blinked from. So when we blink, we can then within 10 seconds use displacement to go back. It's a good way to kind of confuse your enemies. Then we have Evocation. This is a combat utility ability that we can use. I actually am going to put it in the offensive category because what this does is this will increase your mana regeneration by 750% for 6 seconds. The Arcane Mage uses a lot of this resource. So this will allow you to use a lot of that resource, hit this button, get it all back, and use it again. Frost Nova is a crowd control ability. It'll freeze all targets around you, but damage will break that effect. Greater Invisibility, this is a defensive cooldown you can use. It will make you invisible and untargetable for 20 seconds, remove threat, and also reduce the damage you take, so it's a good ability to use to get yourself out of a bad situation. We also have Ice Block. This will encase you in a block of ice. You won't be able to do anything, but no one will be able to do anything to you either. Next we have Polymorph. This is a crowd control ability. It turns the enemy into a sheep, basically meaning they can't do anything. Damage taken can break that effect, so you'll want to watch out for that. We have our portal menu. This will create a portal to a city, and that portal is clickable by your friendly party members or raid members, so they can all teleport to the city along with you. We have Presence of Mind. This is a offensive cooldown ability. It causes our next two Arcane Blasts, which are some of our core rotation abilities, to be instant cast. Prismatic Barrier. This is a combat utility ability. We're going to put it right next to Arcane Intellect to remember we should have this up at all times. It puts a shield on us for a minute that absorbs damage and reduces magic damage taken. And it also reduces the duration of any harmful magic effects on us. Remove Curse is a combat utility ability that gets rid of curses on the target. Probably not going to use that often in the open world. Slow is a crowd control ability. It slows the target's movement speed by 50%. Slow Fall is a combat utility ability we can use, or you can put it in your miscellaneous, wherever you want. It essentially causes you to fall slowly so that you don't take fall damage. Spell Steal will remove a beneficial effect from an enemy and give it to you. Really don't use that too often in outdoor content either. We have our teleport menu. Teleport works like portal, except it only transfers you to the location. It doesn't create a portal that everybody can click on. And then finally we have Time Warp. This is a offensive cooldown ability that will give you, party members, and raid members a significant amount of haste for 40 seconds, but then it goes on a long cooldown and you can't be affected by it again for quite a while. So let's talk about the resources available to the Arcane Mage. We have two resources. The first one is mana, and unlike a lot of specializations, mana is very important to the Arcane Mage, and we'll see why in a little bit. But essentially, you start with an amount of mana based on usually your intellect, and you will spend that to cast spells. If you ever run out of mana, there will be some spells that you cannot cast. The second resource available to the Arcane Mage are these orbs here, which are called Arcane Charges. You cast abilities that build up your Arcane Charges, and then you can spend those Arcane Charges either to on certain abilities will consume them, or if you have a certain amount, you get added benefits from some of your other spells, which we're going to see pretty quickly here. So let's get into the core rotation of the Arcane Mage. We've only got 4 spells here, and it's all pretty straightforward. So as the Arcane Mage, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to build up your Arcane Charges. And you do that either with Arcane Blast or Arcane Explosion. If you have a single target, you cast your Arcane Blast. Multiple targets, you cast Arcane Explosion. So, we're going to start combats, and the first thing we're going to do, we're facing a single target, so we're going to cast Arcane Blast. This will deal some damage to the target, and it will generate an Arcane Charge. For each Arcane Charge that you have, the damage of this ability increases by 70%, so it gets significantly higher, and the mana cost is increased by 100%. So also significantly higher, and the cast time is reduced by 8%. So you can get up to 4 Arcane Charges, meaning you can get 280% additional damage, 400% increased mana cost, and 24% reduced cast time. So this really ramps up. The damage ramps up, the cast time goes down, so you're casting these really rapidly, but the cost of mana of this ability goes up significantly as well. So if we take a look at this, so we're doing about 52,000 with 1 blast. All right, 89, 126, and 163,000. So you can see there the damage is going up. But now, if we look at how much mana it costs to cast this spell, you'll see our mana goes down quite a bit. This ability is now costing us 2,750 mana. And this is where I said Arcane Mages actually do care about mana, because if you just keep casting Arcane Blast, you will eat through your mana super quickly. And we're going to do that here just to show off our evocation. That channels, and it gives us a ton of mana back so that we can start casting again. So we've built up our Arcane Charges with our Arcane Blast. What do we do with them? Well, you can hang on to them and not spend them, so your Arcane Blast will deal increased damage, or you can cast Arcane Barrage. Arcane Barrage will launch bolts of arcane energy at the target, dealing a pretty good amount of damage. It will consume all Arcane Charges you have, whether that's 2, 4, 3, whatever. For each Arcane Charge, it will deal 35% additional damage and hit 1 additional nearby target for 40% of its damage. So, when we cast this ability, you'll see those Arcane Missiles go out, and they did funnel to extra targets. So if we cast it right now, it's going to be pretty weak. 75,000 damage or so is what we got off of that. If we build up our charges to 1 and we cast it, alright, we see that it hits 1 extra target. Now if we go and target this guy here, let's build up our charges again with Arcane Blast. So now we've got 4 charges. So this is going to deal a lot more damage, and it'll jump. We'll shoot out missiles to all the other targets as well. So that's what you're going to spend your arcane charges on. Now, if you're facing multiple enemies, you can use this ability here, Arcane Explosion. This causes an explosion around you, and for each enemy that you deal damage to, you will get an arcane charge as long as you hit a target. So when you're facing multiple enemies, you can cast Arcane Explosion over and over again, deal all that damage to them, and then cast your Arcane Barrage, which will spread to other nearby targets. Now you're probably wondering, okay, what is this graphic that's popping up near the side of our character? And what is this ability here on number 1 that we haven't talked about yet? Well, that goes and brings us to our passive ability. So we have 2. We have our Mastery. This increases our mana regeneration rate and maximum mana. Also, our Arcane Charges increase the damage of Arcane Blast by an additional percentage, and Arcane Barrage by a percentage as well. The more important passive ability here is Clear Casting. For each 100 mana we spend, so once again we're spending mana pretty heavily on our Arcane Mage, you have a 1% chance to gain Clear Casting, which makes your next Arcane Missiles or Arcane Explosion free, and it channels 20% faster. So Arcane Explosion is our AoE ability that we were talking about. More importantly, Arcane Missiles is our ability on number 1. This launches a wave of 5 Arcane Missiles at the enemy over 2.1 seconds, causing a hefty amount of arcane damage. So, as we're spending mana on our Arcane Blast, Arcane Explosion, we'll get a chance to get that Clear Casting proc, and then our Arcane Missiles will be totally free. You can see it cost 3,000 mana to cast this if you were just to do it without Clear Casting. So it being free is huge because you want to spend your mana on your Arcane Blasts. And it will channel even faster. So over 2.1 seconds, it'll be 20% faster than that. So we will start spending some mana until we get that Clear Casting. Alright, so we're building up. We're spending our mana. We've got our 4 charges. We can either keep casting Arcane Blast for that increased damage. There we go. We got our Clear Cast. So now we can use Arcane Missiles for free. Go right back into our Arcane Blasts. And Arcane Missiles for free. Now this has some synergy here because the more Arcane charges you have, the harder your Arcane Blast is going to hit and the more mana you spend. And remember, for Clear Casting, it's every 100 mana you spend, you have a 1% chance to gain Clear Casting. So right now, with 4 Arcane Charges, when we use Arcane Blast, we're spending 2,750 mana. So we have a 27.5% chance to gain Clear Casting on our Arcane Missiles. If we were to spin that on Arcane Barrage, all of our charges go away. Now when we Arcane Blast, we're spending 550 mana, meaning we have 5% chance, because it doesn't count the 50, 5% chance to get Clear Casting. So Arcane is all about a balance between, do I keep my Arcane charges so that I can hit harder with Arcane Blast and have a higher percent chance to proc the Clear Casting on Arcane Missiles, or do I build up to those Arcane charges, those 4 charges, and then spin them on Arcane Barrage to deal a significant amount of damage and hit a bunch of targets? As far as Arcane Explosion goes, it doesn't scale with your Arcane charges at all, so it's really just an ability you use to hit a bunch of targets. So that's what you're going to do with the core rotation for the Arcane Mage. So now let's get into the talent tree. We're going to create a build that works well in open world content. So let's go ahead and set that up. Okay, so this is the build that I recommend you use in outdoor content. It's not the only one that you could use, but it's the one I recommend, and we'll be showing off at the end of this video. We're going to go through each talent, talk about what it does and why we've chosen it for the build, starting with Rule of Threes. So, when you gain your third arcane charge, the cost of your next arcane blast or arcane missiles is reduced by 100%. So this makes it so that we've got that arcane explosion and arcane missiles. It basically guarantees that after 3 charges, we get a free... Oh, we need to spend our charges. Let's do that. Alright, so we're going to build up to our 3 charges. There we go. And on our third one, we gain our Rule of Threes. So our next Arcane Blast or Arcane Missiles is free. So what this does is it gives us the ability to build that 4th Arcane Charge without spending any mana on the Arcane Blast. So let's get rid of these again. And so we're going to show that off real quick. So we're spending our mana, it's going down, we get to our 3rd charge, and now this one does nothing. It's totally free. The other option we have there is building up to 3 charges. Yep. And now our arcane missiles will be totally free. Alright, so that gives us a little flexibility. It saves us some mana. It makes it so that we don't have to rely so much on clear casting in order to cast our arcane missiles. So we got some flexibility there. Next we have Shimmer. So let's show off. Our regular blink will teleport us forward 20 yards. When we are switching this over to Shimmer, it basically makes it so that we have 2 charges on blink. So we can blink and then blink again. So it adds a little bit of mobility to our build and gives us some more kind of defensive tools if we need them to get away from enemies faster, and also just helps us travel. Next we have Incanter's Flow. Magical energy flows through you while in combat, building up to 20% increased damage, then diminishing down to 4% increased damage, cycling every 10 seconds. So what this means is that no matter what, with this talent, you will always have 4% increased damage while you're in combat. But that can build all the way up to 20%. So if we take a look at this, if we get into combat, you're going to see see our Incanter's Flow. That's building up to 20%. And then it goes back down to 4%. And then it starts going back up to 20%. So we always have at least 4% increased damage, and that does get all the way up to 20%, and that is just a nice boost to our damage. Also, as you get really good at playing the specialization, you can kind of start to look at how many stacks of the Incanter's Flow you have and try to do your hardest hitting abilities when you have the full 20% increased damage. It's kind of a micromanagement mini game that you can play if you want to, but if you don't, you could totally ignore it and you just deal increased damage. Next we have Charged Up. This is an offensive cooldown we can use. It's got a 40-second cooldown, and it gives us 4 arcane charges immediately. So if for whatever reason we need 4 arcane charges to do a big burst of damage, or we just want to start combat with that full-powered arcane blast, we can use that. This is great for rare spawns and elites and things like that, so that's why we've picked this talent. Next, we have Ice Ward. This gives our Frost Nova 2 charges. This is going to help us be a little bit more defensive because we'll be able to cast this, freeze our targets, and if we're fighting a bunch of enemies, we're probably going to need to cast it again. Ice Ward gives us the ability to do that. Then we have Reverberate. If Arcane Explosion hits at least 3 targets, it has a 40% chance to generate an extra Arcane Charge. So this makes it so that if we're fighting multiple enemies, we can cast our Arcane Explosion and get more than 1 Arcane Charge, which will help us build up those charges faster and then spend those on Arcane Barrage or hit hard with our Arcane Blast and get those enemies down quicker, kill them faster. And then finally, we have Time Anomaly. At any moment, you have a chance to gain Arcane Power for 8 seconds, which is our ability here. It's one of our offensive cooldowns. For 10 seconds, you deal 30% more spell damage, and your spells cost 30% less mana. So we could get Arcane Power for 8 seconds. We can get Evocation for 1 second. So remember, Evocation is the ability that increases our regeneration by our mana regeneration by 750% for 1 second. So we can get a burst of extra mana. Or we can gain 4 arcane charges whenever. So this is a nice ability. It's going to randomly increase our damage or give us charges or give us some mana back. Now, if you don't like the random aspect of that, you could choose either one of these. Overpowered will increase your... it'll cause your arcane power to increase damage by 60% and reduce mana cost by 60%. So instead of 30-30, 60-60. Or you can take the Arcane Orb, which is a pretty cool ability on a 20-second cooldown. This will launch an orb forward. It will deal damage to enemies it passes through, and it gives you an arcane charge when you cast it and every time it deals damage. So it's another good way to get a bunch of arcane charges up. I picked the Time Anomaly because I like the kind of random aspect, and I like the variety of things you can get from it. So as far as our rotation goes, this does change a little bit, because ideally what we're going to want to do if we have no arcane charges is we'll want to Arcane Blast 3 times or Arcane Explosion to get up to our 3 charges. So let's do this again. We're going to Arcane Blast up to 3 charges. And then we'll hit our Arcane Missiles because it'll be free. Then we'll Arcane Blast to our 4th one. And then we'll decide, do we want to spend it on Arcane Barrage or do we want to keep casting Arcane Blasts? And that's it. That's how the build works. Let's take a look at the PvP talents you could use if you want to toggle on War Mode and mainly focus on PvE. First off, we have Relentless. This will replace your Honorable Medallion, turn it into a passive ability that reduces the duration of crowd controls on you by 20%. So turns it into a nice kind of set it forget it talent. We have Arcane Empowerment, Clear Casting, which is what lets us cast our Arcane Missiles for free. Can now stack 2 additional times. So we can get up to 3 stacks of this, I believe. Let me make sure I'm not... Yeah, okay. 3 stacks. And it will increase the damage of Arcane Missiles by 5% per stack. So if you wait until you have 3 stacks, you get 15% extra damage on your Arcane Missiles. Also, because of this, Clear Casting no longer reduces the mana cost of Arcane Explosion, but honestly, you're mostly going to want to spend your Clear Cast on your Arcane Missiles anyway, so that's perfectly fine. Then we have Master of Escape. This reduces the cooldown of Greater Invisibility by 45 seconds. This is a very powerful defensive tool that effectively just removes you from combat and makes you untargetable for 20 seconds. So it's great for traveling through an area to get to another area. If you get yourself into a hairy situation, it's great for getting out of that as well. And this turns it from a 2-minute cooldown into a 1 minute and 15 second cooldown, so you can use it much more often. And then finally, Temporal Shield. This gives us an ability on a 45-second cooldown. It envelops you in a shield for 6 seconds, and 100% of all damage taken while shielded will instantly be restored when the shield ends. So you cast this ability, you're still going to take a bunch of damage, but as long as you last that 6 seconds, it all comes back. So this could be a massive, basically a massive heal that you can use, and survivability on a mage is pretty important. So having an ability like this to use in the open world is really, really nice. So the next thing to do is take this build out into the open world and show it off against some different enemies. So I'm going to cut to that, and I'll see you there. Alright, so we're here in Suramar City, and we're going to take the build down, show it off against a couple different types of enemies. So let's go ahead. So remember, we want to go ahead and just start building up our charges with our Arcane Blast against a single target. And you're going to see we start to do more and more damage as we get those abilities. We got our Clear Casting for our Arcane Missiles, so we can cast that. That does a pretty significant amount of damage. Now you got a couple of strategies here. So what you can do is you can target an enemy, and if you've got your Arcane Charges, you could spin them on your Arcane Barrage. to get damage out that way. Or you could save up your charges so that your Arcane Blast will hit really hard. Now we want to make sure when we're out here questing, we put our Prismatic Barrier up. That's going to help us absorb some damage. And here we've got full Arcane charges, and you can see how much a Arcane Blast does. It's basically a one-hit kill on a regular enemy. Let's go over here and target this guy. So we'll hit him with our Arcane Blast. He's dead. Alright, we can use our Arcane Explosion here. Kill them off. Alright, so let's get ourselves into some trouble here. Let's pull all these guys here. We're going to go ahead and cast our Frost Nova. We're going to shimmer away. We could turn around and cast our Arcane Blast. We can use our Arcane Missiles. That's going to... use our Arcane Barrage. That's going to spread to other targets. Make sure we keep our barrier up. We can Frost Nova again. Go ahead and build up some charges of our Arcane. Here we got our clear casting on our missiles again. We've got another Frost Nova. So you can see how that extra charge on the Frost Nova really does help us to stay alive. So we're just going to kill off this guy real quick. And get our barrier back up. We could turn this guy into a sheep if we just need to take a break for a second. If we want to try to get some health back. We can use our charged up to get 4 arcane charges right away. We don't really have a good way to get any sort of health back here. But we can try to just set ourselves up for success while this guy is a sheep. So we can re-up our prismatic barrier. Go ahead and let's go into our Arcane Blasts on this guy. Alright, we want to make sure we stay out of his AoE. We can Frost Nova him again. Go ahead and keep going on these Arcane Blasts. We're going to spend them. Alright, we got another Frost Nova. Arcane Blast. We got clear casting on our Arcane Missiles. Get our barrier back up. Go ahead and turn him into a sheep again. Give ourselves time to recharge here. Now, Arcane... Oh, we got these guys coming. That's going to be fun. Alright, so the thing with Polymorph that I forgot to mention is it brings your opponent... It heals your opponent while they're a sheep. So we're actually... we're just setting ourselves back with this. So let's go ahead and Ice Block. And we're probably just going to want to get out of this situation, I think. We're probably going to die here. Alright, we're going to... Yep, and we're dead. That's the second video I've died in. So, Mage is one of the classes that I play a little bit less than the other ones. But I also will say that you do have to play to the strengths of your specialization. I personally think Arcane is very good at killing a single target pretty quickly. We'll get over here and we will resurrect ourselves and we'll go get our revenge. So in between fights, you don't really have a good way to heal yourself. So you can conjure your refreshment. That's going to put some food into your bag and you can... I usually add that to my bar. And you can use that to eat in between fights. It will restore 100% of your health and mana over 20 seconds. So let's go back and get our revenge and see how we can handle this guy just by himself. Alright, so we're going to build up our 4 charges instantly. We're going to start hitting him with this Arcane Blast. We got our clear casting on our missiles. Alright, let's build it up, get our barrier. We can Frost Nova, we can blink away. Go ahead and use our clear casting on our missiles again. Get out of the way of that. We can teleport back. Alright, use our Frost Nova again. Cast our missiles. Build up our blast again. Alright, you can see we did a little bit better that time against him just as a single target. So, like I said, play to the strengths of your specialization, and, you know, if I can do it, you can definitely do it. Let's go. Just since I died, I feel like I have to own up to this. I want to find those demons. Take on all those demons. Is that them there? No, that's not them. Maybe it is. Yeah, I think that's them. Let's get ourselves into some trouble. Alright, so there you go. I was just playing like a little bit of a noob earlier. So, what I did there that was significantly different, and we'll talk about that after I get rid of this enemy here. Alright, just go away. Okay. I guess we're just gonna keep fighting. Okay, so let me explain what I did differently on that fight. I feel like I redeemed myself a little bit there. The change in tactics there is that when I knew I was going to fight a bunch of enemies like that, I immediately started casting Arcane Explosion, right? Because you guarantee get one charge if you hit an enemy, but we have the talent that gives us the chance to reverberate. We get the chance to get that extra arcane charge. So I was using Arcane Explosion to build up those charges really quickly. Then instead of trying to deal damage to a single target, I was casting Arcane Barrage because that deals damage, and for each charge of each of our arcane charges, it will hit an additional target. So we're going down, we're building up those charges to 4. Made sure I had 4. I hit Arcane Barrage. So massive damage to all those targets. I used Charge Up to get 4 arcane charges, and then immediately Arcane Barrage. I went back into Arcane Explosion to get more charges, Arcane Barrage, and I basically just repeated that process until everything was dead. And that was a much more effective way to kill off multiple targets. And, you know, I can show that off again here. So, Arcane Explosion, 4 charges. We're going to Arcane Barrage, Arcane Explosion, Arcane Explosion, Arcane Barrage, Arcane Explosion, Arcane Explosion, Arcane Barrage. We got an enemy over here. So now we can hit this. We'll get our Prismatic Barrier up, and we will just... Oh, that guy is a elite. They heard me. They heard me. They were like, he's redeeming himself. We got to go out there. We got to kill him. So this time we are not going to polymorph this guy. Because that will just heal him. And there you go. Alright, fully redeemed. I feel like I'm fully redeemed now. So, I hope this has helped you to understand a little bit how to play the Arcane Mage, and giving you the confidence to get out there on your own Arcane Mage, start trying it out in some questing and leveling, see if it is a specialization you'd like to play. I feel so bad just having this blinking red border. There we go. If you like the video, give me a like, subscribe, whatever you want to do to help encourage me to keep making this kind of content. I hope you have a good time in Battle for Azeroth. Thanks for watching.